Do you imagine, whoever you are, that when you judge those who do such things, and yet do them yourself, you will escape the judgment of God? Shin Megami Tensei is a series known for its countercultural themes, highlighted in its use of demons to convey ideas about society, most notable of which is in SMT II, where in every ending, the final boss is the god of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This undoubtedly helps solidify the series' punk edge, and becomes even more surprising with the context that the game is meant to be law-centric. That's not to say that the game is biased towards the ending, rather, it's what the game is trying to explore. This makes SMT2 a very interesting case study, because generally, the law alignment is viewed as simply serving God and obeying all authority. While this is a prominent theme, the conversation shouldn't stop there. You have to remember, in most games, a being called God doesn't even show up, and isn't actually personally engaged in the ongoing conflict. In this context, what does it mean to serve God? This is what SMT2's law route is all about, and what we're going to be talking about today. Alright, first up, short summary for all the people out there who haven't played SMT2 yet. For the record, if you haven't, you should. It's a great game. Think SMT4, but 10 times cooler. Decades after the end of SMT1, the Order of Messiah rose up and took over the government. With their newfound authority, they built a futuristic citadel called the Tokyo Millennium on top of the husk of the old Tokyo. Its government was secretly led by the 4 archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, as the Elders, who viewed the Millennium as a transitory stage towards the 1,000-year kingdom, a theoretical utopia where God's chosen would live together with the Messiah in perpetual peace. However, their prophesied Messiah never came, so the archangels came to a conclusion. They had to make their own Messiah, but their God saw this as a grave insult, and had Gabriel, the only archangel who didn't go along with the others, lie in wait with a new plan. Gabriel was ordered to infiltrate the Messiah Project, and work with one of their test subjects, Zayin, to destroy the Tokyo Millennium and all of humanity. Now fast forward to the end of the law route, where Zayin, together with the main character Aleph, launch into outer space with a small group of followers on the spaceship Eden. Then Zayin, as Satan, without any explanation, fires the orbital laser Megiddo arc directly at the Earth, wiping out all mankind. With their job done, they go speak to God, where they're both congratulated, but Satan has one more important thing left to say. O Lord, my judgment is not yet complete. There is one more, not amongst the chosen, that must be judged. One that has committed the grave sin of genocide. Yes, Lord, the one I must now judge is the one highest God, my creator, you. And this really doesn't make sense, right? Why would you complain about someone doing something when you just did it for them? Well, that's because it's not an accurate translation. For those who don't know, Shin Megami Tensei II has never received official translation. The one people are most familiar with is by fan translation group Ion Genesis, which released in May 13th, 2004. This is the team that translated every mainline SMT game on the Super Famicom, so 1, 2, and IF. The thing about these translations is that they aren't trying to be literal. They like to spice the dialogue up to make the game sound more vivid. A direct translation of that same line would be more like, God, my judgment is not yet finished. The last one to be judged is, the one and only supreme God, my creator. If you'll notice, there's no mention of genocide. And further, Satan doesn't say his motivation at all. This changes the entire context of the law ending, and I'd argue that as it stands, it makes the character entirely incoherent. Changes like this, though not as crucial to the text, are quite common across AG's Mega 10 translations, and are fairly well known in some corners of the fanbase. Occasionally, this is interpreted as an active bias on the team's part by the fanbase, but I believe that it's more of AG working off the information given and trying to make the dialogue more colorful based on their perception of the text. This style of translation sometimes has the effect of emphasizing biases that were already present in the games. Normally, I don't think it's an issue. The games tend to be direct. It's not hard to guess what characters are thinking. Personally, I'd even go as far as to say it often adds to the text. An easy example is the first demon encounter in SMT1, when the player runs into a Preda. A direct translation of the event would be, Ghost Preda appeared, while a Jeez says, Ghost Preda appeared and ripped out the man's throat. Personally, I think this is one of the most iconic moments in the game, but in the original, it doesn't have nearly as much weight, if any at all. However, issues arise in a scenario like Satan's, where AG aren't given enough info and come to their own separate conclusion about the text. This brings us a new dilemma. If the game doesn't explain Satan's motivations, how are we, the player, supposed to understand his actions? To do this, we'll have to go back and look at how the law alignment is depicted in both SMT 1 and 2. So to fully understand this, we have to know who the Order of Messiah are. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to give a short summary here, but if you're interested in a full breakdown, check out my video, Shin Megami Tensei Beyond Good and Evil. It goes over the themes behind the alignments and other series staples in much more depth. I'd recommend it as a series crash course. There will be a link to it on screen and in the description. The Order of Messiah's main tenet is total devotion and submission to God. This view of monotheism is used to represent a belief in a specific ideal that functions as the basis of reality and/or society. In turn, this means anything that goes against the will of God cannot be allowed. By foregoing their freedom, adherents are given community, structure, and relative safety in a nearly destroyed world. This is meant to represent forsaking the self to join a unified collective. In the context of a Japanese society, where this group is explicitly foreign, this loss of identity is not just personal, but social, undertaken through imperialism. This is tied into one of the Order of Messiah's main inspirations, the Knights Templar, an order of crusaders that eventually became the grandfather of all secret society conspiracies. In this sense, the Order of Messiah represents the New World Order, from far-right Christian conspiracy theories, like the Illuminati, that's trying to enact a nebulous form of totalitarian socialism. While this was present in SMT 1, with it literally being presented as a conspiracy in the story, this theme reaches maturity in SMT 2. The Tokyo Millennium is the New World Order made manifest. It features a strict, authoritarian government headed by a secret society. In the context of SMT 2, this is used to create a dichotomy between different aspects of the law alignment, with Dark Law being the Elders versus Light Law being Zayin, where the former is explicitly corrupt. The Archangel Gabriel explains where the Millennium went wrong, saying, "I tried to follow the Lord's will, but the Millennium became something that dominated humankind. According to the Word of God, when the 1,000-year kingdom came, then the Messiah would emerge to lead us." However, they never appeared in the Millennium. Unable to wait for the Messiah, the Archangels tried to create one of their own, and so their actions diverged from the will of God. This inability to wait for God was actually alluded to back in SMT 1 with the Law Hero, saying, "The 1,000-year kingdom should soon become a reality. However, many demons have swarmed the cathedral. In a scenario like this, we can't wait for God's arrival." Likewise, his role in the game is also foreshadowing SMT 2's Messiah project, officially being referred to as Messiah 0, the prototype. This goes to illustrate that there is a natural progression between the actions and ideology of the Order of Messiah through these two games. Therefore, this crucial misunderstanding of God's will is built into the foundation of the Tokyo Millennium. In this context, the Messiah functions mainly as a tool for manipulation. A key aspect of the success of Messianism in universe is that it gives structure to people's lives in a dying world. The Messiah's role in this society would be to guide people ideally towards God. However, the Archangels took advantage of their position to control people in the Millennium. This attitude is made most clear in the Tokyo Millennium social structure. The Elders instituted a strict caste system to separate people based on how useful they were to the state. There are three main classifications. At the bottom is general population, so anyone who's simply allowed to live in the Millennium. Then we have second-class citizens, which includes those allowed to own arm terminals or comps. And lastly are the first-class citizens, who are the inhabitants of the center. This is the Millennium's upper-class district. Here, all physical needs are completely taken care of. Everyone there is living relatively well, at least compared to the outside. This makes going up the food chain a dream for most. But still, it's not easily done. Very few people are actually allowed to live in the center. The elders have very strict regulations and meticulously curate its population. Many of the center's citizens, including the Millennium's entire police force, the Temple Knights, are members of the Order of Messiah. This is because the center represents a consolidation of power, where the pre-existent hierarchy of the religion was assimilated into that of the government. For instance, in the game, the government is directly led by a bishop, which is a religious title for someone who presides over a local church. In this lens, the center's oppression is one where people who were already in a position of relative power prop themselves up further while exploiting underclasses to maintain their place in society. The easiest example of this would be the factory, where people are being forced to work themselves to death, while citizens of the center don't face any real hardship in their day-to-day lives. A society under such strict control can't possibly prosper. Consider this in the context of the series' depiction of the alignment cycle. It's the inevitable shift between law and chaos, where if one grows too strong, the other gets empowered to challenge it. This being representative of the human condition that pushes against political extremes. Here, it becomes clear that the center, as a class, represents an elite desperately trying to keep a grip on a society that's slowly but steadily slipping. And they're fully aware of this. To this end, the center settled on compromising their ideals to stabilize their control over society. For instance, take Valhalla, a free area governed by the Madam, who had a very different political philosophy than the Elders. She believed that a peaceful society is predicated on the public having an outlet for their desires. Under her jurisdiction, Valhalla became the most populated area in the Millennium. The area was so lightly policed that the Gaians were able to form a small community in the slums. Overall, Valhalla may have worse material conditions than the center, but its comparatively lax rules made it a much more comfortable place to live, which in turn made the citizens more complacent. However, social conditioning isn't the center's only trick. The center had also begun secretly hiring dark and chaos demons to do their dirty work. As soon as Valhalla was deemed more trouble than it was worth, the elders made a deal with the fallen angel Abaddon to wipe it off the map. Similarly, the area Holy Town was created to be used as a religious center, but when it failed, King Frost was used to freeze the city, killing any dissidents. Later in the game, the elders used the whole population of Holy Town as a bargaining chip, threatening to cut its airflow to force its revolutionaries to comply. Then again in the factory, the elders work with the demon Belphegor to brainwash the workers, making them compliant. This in particular references a biblical story in Numbers 25, where the ancient Israelites mingled with the Moabites, and some began to worship the god Baal of Peor, of which the name Belphegor is derived, and of course, this angered the Jewish god. This is the context under which we find Zayin. Zayin wasn't just compelled to betray the center because of Gabriel's plans. He had his own reasons, based on personal experience, seeing the vast array of crimes committed by the center. Their difference in ideology can best be summarized in SMT2 GBA's fourth visionary item, Goldwing Harp. It depicts Zayin and Gimel having a discussion about salvation, with Zayin arguing that it should be accessible to everyone. Gimel responds saying, "That's impossible. We should obey the will of the center. Currently, the center does not have the power and margin to save all people. Even inside the center, the tares are sown. Moreover, they might be growing. If you find the tares, shouldn't you burn them?" Here, Gimel becomes the living embodiment of the issues with the center. Their view of salvation is self-serving. They themselves have created the standard for which people should be judged, and refuse to let anyone question that. This leads to Zayin's realization in the factory, where he says, "After fighting you, I have come to a decision. Rules are to be obeyed, but wrong laws must be corrected. I am no longer going to follow the center's way. I have decided to do what I, myself, must." This is him realizing that the center, or more broadly, laws as they exist, should not be viewed as end-all, be-all. Rules are a means to an end, a way to help guide society. Laws that actively harm people should be challenged. This is also shown in the 10th visionary item, Laurel Leaf, showing Gimel being questioned by his handlers. Priest: who is to be saved? Gimel: those who obey God, the ones who dedicate their lives. Priest: how should a person live? Gimel: according to the authority's rules. Priest, who is the authority? Gimel, God. Priest, what should be done with those who oppose God? Gimel, they should be destroyed. Priest, what about those who obey God? Gimel, they should be saved. Priest, what should be done with those who try to obey God, but don't fit with God's purpose? Gimel, they should be destroyed. It is God who decides salvation. People's will is unnecessary. It is God and Messiah who determines people's happiness, not the people. Even though by all means, Gimel is technically correct in regards to what we're shown of the Messian faith, the elders call his thought process extreme and that of a ruler. However, at the same time, this makes him more pliable to their demands, so they actually don't mind. What we see here is Gimel replicating the behavior of those over himself. He has become a cog in the machine. This informs Zayin's betrayal. Right before the final boss fight, says, "The world, shining with the Megiddo's light, shall soon be filled with my servants, and flourish." The key word here is servants. In Japanese, the word used has the connotation of menial labor, likely being why Ion Genesis translated it using a strong word like thrall in their version. This shows us that his goals were never actually aligned with Zayin's. Now that he is no longer held back by dogma, he's free to rebel against the same way he did against the center. This is clarified further in the 6th visionary item, Fragment of Petrification Prison, where Zayin has an internal monologue questioning whether or not God had abandoned him after he was defeated by the archangels, when an unknown voice calls out to him, saying, "There is no God. If God will not interfere, no matter what happens to you, then God will not interfere, no matter what you do either. Don't force yourself to obey. Were you not born in the name of God? By definition, is not whatever you do God's will? Do not try to obey something. Do not try to obey someone. Do not think of God as having just one face. God is not good. God is everything. Everything is God. You too can become the face of God. You are not one to be judged and punished. You are the ultimate temple knight. As the one closest to God, obey his commands and become the one to mete out the judgment and punishment. Fulfill your role as the one closer to God, closer than the center and closer than the elders. Here, the word God is used both literally and metaphorically interchangeably. When the voice says there is no God, what they mean is there's no real standard way to live. And before that, the center tried to present themselves as representing the objective basis of reality. They believed that their vision of the 1,000-year kingdom was the only way to have a properly functioning society, through the structure only they could provide. However, we can now see that their goals were ultimately self-serving. Zayin had to realize that and move forward on his own path. In a way, he became his own god. This is gestured at in the epilogue of SMT2's Law Route, when neither Gabriel nor Zayin stay with you. Gabriel refuses, saying that since God is dead, she no longer has any role to play, or anywhere to go, unlike you. While Zayin thanks both Aleph and Hiroko, then returns to the earth, as a reference to the creation of Adam, who was created from dust. Them leaving represents the lack of a foundation for an upper class in Law's future society. With Zayin's motivations for rebelling established, we have to ask, why did he still use the Megiddo arc to wipe out mankind? Zayin hints towards this when you fight him near the end of the neutral route, saying, God abandoned the Tokyo Millennium. He knew that as long as current day humankind was around, an ideal world would never be realized. We can understand Zayin as believing that humanity as it currently exists is inherently flawed. Due to this, he intended to replace them with the population of his small colony, Eden, after the earth was purified. Eden is his answer to the authoritarian rule of the center, and it's best summed up by an NPC who describes it saying, regardless of origin or status, all those who heard the word of God were willing to forsake their knowledge and were brought here. This is, of course, a play on the biblical story of the Garden of Eden. Zayin believes he has to restart humanity and revert them to a state of pure innocence, without the knowledge of good and evil. This way, having ill will towards someone would be impossible. The use of Eden also works as a reference to Ophite Gnosticism, which holds that the serpent in Eden was actually helping humans reach knowledge to free them from the false god Demiurge. In Revelations 12:9, Satan is referred to as the ancient serpent, so it's sort of like Zayin is enlightening people by taking away their knowledge. If you want to learn more about Gnosticism, like their creation myth or the Demiurge, check out my video introducing Ringo and the Gnostic themes of Soul Hackers 2, which again, a link to this will be on screen and in the description. Similarly, the cleansing of the earth may be a vague reference to Revelations 21, a new heaven and new earth where God will live together with man. This is interesting because in the Bible, this occurs after the final judgment, when the souls of the dead are judged. This means death doesn't exist anymore. That's important because in Christianity, as Romans 6:23 says, the wages of sin is death, and this began with Adam and Eve's original sin. So Zayin is symbolically fulfilling this by returning humans to Eden. Further, the new heaven and new earth are established after the end of the 1,000-year kingdom, so it doubles to represent Zayin going beyond the whims of and the center. It's also worth noting that Satan's use of the Megiddo arc plays a major role in the thematic background of SMT2. Across the series, law tends to be based in utilitarianism. This means they view ethics as a numbers game, with the goal being to find pleasure for the most amount of people possible, which often comes at the expense of the minority. We can essentially read Satan's choice as a trolley problem, where he's weighing the lives on Earth versus his theoretical future. This ties into the religious themes behind Satan, but not the Christian Satan. Anthroposophy was a spiritual movement founded by Rudolf Steiner in the early 1900s. It held that Satan, here called Ahriman after the Zoroastrian devil, is an archetype of spiritual being that wanted humans to forget the divine nature of the universe. Their goal is a world where society is strictly determined by politics and economics, or as Steiner said, it is their ideal to reduce everything to matter, to mechanize. This is important to recognize because in Shin Megami Tensei, law's goals are often to suppress ancient indigenous gods. Likewise, multiple angels in SMT2 are clearly mechanical. You can even see this design aspect in Satan, with its two knobbed tails. This is tied to Satan taking away human knowledge, through a shared theme of transhumanism. Law believes it has to change humanity's relation to free will, in order to realize its ideal society. While it does seem to work, it's still framed as removing a defining aspect of one's humanity. This coalesces to form Law's presentation as inherently alien or soulless. In this lens, Satan's actions are an explicitly cold and calculated choice to sacrifice mankind as we know it for what he sees as a brighter future, no matter the cost. That said, Law in SMT2 also contains several attributes normally associated with chaos. Satan's goal of cleansing the earth to repopulate it has parallels to Shiva's role in Hinduism, where he destroys the old so his fellow god, Brahma, can create a new. This destruction is viewed as positive and a natural part of the cycle that's necessary for new things to exist. This seems to be purposeful considering Satan's design featured the third eye motif, which is associated with Shiva. In Hinduism, the third eye represents deeper wisdom and allows the user to see the true nature of reality. Like Zayin in SMT2, when Shiva's third eye is opened, it incinerates everything in its path. Atlas themselves have explicitly related Satan's role as the Dragon of Revelation to the series' use of the cycle of rebirth. In the Nocturne licensed Lavi J Laptop, a message attributed to the character Stephen discusses apocalyptic scripture, saying, "This is the story of the world's rebirth, one which couldn't have occurred without the existence of demons. We think of them as the opposite of good, appearing to embody the name evil and disrupting the world. However, from a different perspective, they appear to revolutionize it, embodying an energy that sensed disturbance in the world." We can take this even further with a quote from the Shin Megami Tensei TTRPG rulebook, where Kazunari Suzuki, one of the writers for both SMT1 and 2, said, "The concept of a wrathful god eventually warped into that of a guardian deity who protected its nations and peoples through the development of governance and culture. However, in the Battle of the Apocalypse, said at the end of the century, the gods reveal their true, violent selves. They cast aside their gentle, radiant forms and show their true nature as demons. What this is trying to explain is that the difference between a god and a demon is the audience's perception of them, and even benevolent gods have a demonic aspect lying under the surface. This is clarified in another message from the Nocturne laptop, where Stephen describes angels as manifestations of aspects of God on earth, as opposed to the popular view of angels simply being graceful messengers. He says, "Since God is a being who desires to manifest wrath, it produces angels of wrath to embody it. For that reason, the angels are not all beautiful beings, as was mentioned earlier. While there are benevolent angels as the right hand of God, there are also cruel angels as its left hand. The most well-known cruel angels you may be aware of are the angel of death and the angel of judgment. Due to their ruthless nature, they are often perceived as demons, even though they are the embodiment of God's will. One of these angels of judgment is Satan. This is why in SMT2, he's referred to as the judge of both humans and demons. Unlike Christians, Jews do not believe in a big metaphysical villain juxtaposed with God. In Judaism, the word Satan is not a name, but actually a title. Ha-Satan means the adversary in ancient Hebrew, and is in this context used to refer to an angel who works for God, or as a metaphor for the inclination towards doing evil. This goes back to the book of Job, where the Satan questions how much faith God's most loyal follower truly has. Here, he acts as heavenly prosecutor, his job to discern the true nature of humans by tempting them into sin. Due to Satan's actions, Job is left without any family or property and questions how God could do this to him, saying, "Even when I cry out violence, I am not answered. I call aloud, but there is no justice." This is important for two reasons. The first is that this relates to Satan's role in the game. It's twisted here, but in both, Satan has man question God. The second is that this explains Satan's cultural evolution into a demon. Even though they work for God, their ill will towards humans led to people seeing them as an evil spirit. We can relate this idea of a cruel aspect of God back to Kazunari Suzuki's quote. In Buddhism, there is a concept called a Dharmapala, which are wrathful deities, positive yet terrifying gods. Their fierce appearance symbolizes their role in defending the faith against threats. For example, a very prominent one of these deities is Mahakala, whose name means the great time or death. Death is equated to time here to represent its inevitability. This is a reference to its original role in Hinduism as the incarnation of Shiva, where with his consort, Mahakali, is said to be able to dissolve the universe with the power of 10 million black flames. What's interesting is that in the Japanese script, during SMT2's neutral ending, Zayin refers to himself as the incarnation or avatar of Satan, and his word choice evokes the religious meaning of the term. We've already discussed some common traits, like the third eye and being sacred fierce deities, but there are some other cursory similarities, like both him and Mahakala having dark blue skin and multiple arms. In addition to that, in Japan, Mahakala became known as Daikokuten, where he was interpreted as one of their 7 gods of fortune, a retinue of deities that bring good luck. Daikokuten specifically is a god of wealth. In the SMT2 Devil Encyclopedia, Satan is referred to as a god of capitalism, calling back to its use in anthroposophy. Initially, this doesn't make much sense in regards to Satan's personal role in the game, but becomes more clear when we consider Law's broader symbolism across the series. Law is often used as a stand-in for American imperialism, and is depicted in the game as being a global elite and or secret society. This leads back to the cognitive dissonance of New World Order conspiracies, where the ultimate goal of capitalists is to enact a socialism defined by a lack of any social differences. Everyone would be the same, with their minds dulled so the elites can have full control over society. It's important to note that the most prominent motif in Satan's design is the number of the beast, 666, featuring many sets of 6 limbs. In the aforementioned conspiracies, the mark of the beast is often seen as a sort of human barcode, cataloging everyone in the system, tracking them so they can't step out of line. This ties into Law's transhumanist themes concerning identity, which in this lens is viewed as negative and dehumanizing. Further, in this context, where the elite are foreigners, this becomes an issue concerning the identity of the Japanese people as a culture. This relation to imperialism has real-life precedents, as in 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini, former supreme leader of Iran, referred to the US as the Great Satan, arguing that it and its allies jeopardized their national autonomy. Thanks for watching all the way through. Hope you enjoyed the video. Zayin is personally my favorite character in the whole series. I think he really stands out as an example of what Law could be. If you're interested in more character analysis, I also have a video on my second favorite character, Yuko Takao from Nocturne. You should definitely watch it if you haven't already. It's pretty enlightening, I think. But enough about me. How about my guy, Scion? They helped with the translations. If you're interested, they play unlocalized games on Twitch. Likewise, we got Newsmay on Twitter. They've been helping with thumbnails for a while now. If you've seen Larrue's new thumbnails, that's the guy. Also, we have Vex Scans on Twitter. They got me the scans for this video. They post a lot of SMT art on Twitter, so check them both out, show them some love, you know how it is. When they make it big, I'm taking the credit. That said, if you want to support the channel, feel free to donate to my Ko-Fi. And if you like collecting, consider using my Buyee affiliate link. When you create an account, you'll be granted a 2,000 yen coupon. Links to my friends, my Ko-Fi, and Buyee will all be in the description. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, all that nonsense, and I'll see you next time.